we're joined with a very highly experienced executive. He has a proven track record in global operations, supply chain management. Tell us, why supply chain? How long have you been in this industry and why this industry? What do you like about it?
Sure, absolutely. So I kind of fell into supply chain.
You're like the founding fathers of some of the stuff we learn in like supply chains.
I wouldn't go that far. I would not go that far.
What are some of the good things you have seen, but also some of the bad things you've seen during the transformation stages?
Sure. Well, yeah, the good things is that there's so many tools available to us, and they just continue to get better and easier to use, right? You know, the new AI, ML tools that are available to us. I mean, we could spend weeks regressing data in Excel. It's better to use the information to make decisions.
Can you share like a story of the time where you were able to actually reshape the operational, cost and efficiencies by outsourcing some of the services that, were an internal, I would say, baggage, right?
Outsourcing a challenge utilizing outsourced capabilities, right? It starts with...
How do you actually convince the stakeholders, right? Like there's so many traditional stakeholders that are so scared to kind of jump into the new story bandwagons or even like doing, offshore things and stuff like that. How do you approach those stakeholders? What is your thought process or things that you kind of do to help with this topic?
Well, absolutely. It's critical.
Data obviously is like the most important aspect of any business, right? But in supply chain, what are some of the like top 3 metrics that you should always have? Welcome everyone to the Vserve e-business solution podcast on supply chain management, where we invite some of the great industry experts to talk about their experience and hopefully gather some helpful tips and tricks along the way. I'm Cynthia, your host, and today we're joined with a very highly experienced executive. He has a proven track record in global operations, supply chain management. He's a president of JPM Consulting Group, and he's an expert in, here goes the list, strategic sourcing, logistics, business development. I'm pretty sure I'm missing a lot of these things, but leadership roles throughout major companies. He has a strong foundation in materials and logistic management. So please help me in welcoming Jim Meyers. Jim, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you very much. It's very kind. Thank you.
You're welcome. We are really excited to hear about you and learn more from you, Jim. And I'm going to start with my, always go-to question. Tell us, why supply chain? How long have you been in this industry and why this industry? What do you like about it?
Sure, absolutely. So I kind of fell into supply chain management. I was an undergraduate at Michigan State University. I was holding down 3 to 4 jobs at the time, working at a biochemistry laboratory. I was playing in a band. I was a maintenance manager at Robert Monska at Michigan State in the mid 80s, kind of created the discipline. And, I took that path and it excited me as far as, just the whole idea of optimizing the path of materials from raw materials all the way to disposal, right? And just really thinking about, how to do that as frictionless as possible. And I was recruited out of Michigan State by Intel Corporation, and fantastic place to land as far as supply chain is concerned. They were experts in negotiations, in sourcing, in value engineering, and just the technical depth of the company was astounding. And within 7 or 8 months of landing at Intel, I was on a sourcing mission to Asia, finding local sources for things that we were buying in the United States and shipping to our factories in Asia, and really got a great tutorial at Intel. My early mentors were really focused on using data in engineering for supply, and we were doing things that we now know as Six Sigma, doing those things in the mid to late 90s. I was implementing process controls with Japanese suppliers in the mid 90s, and those some of the things that we kind of take for granted today. Fantastic opportunity. It kind of dragged me into it and really got me excited. Since then, I've held positions all around the world, lived in Asia for a time, had organizations globally, and really have developed a lot of experiences around sourcing, negotiations, contracting, and moving the materials around the world through various ports. It's been an exciting couple of decades. And I think there's some really fantastic things happening now, really related to technology, that are just going to continue to make it easier for us to do the things.
God, you're like the founding fathers of some of the stuff we learn in like supply chains.
I wouldn't go that far. I would not go that far. No, but I did get a good, a window seat as, of watching the technology and the discipline really take off.
Perfect. Well, Jim, that is such an amazing journey, and it's so great to hear about that. I mean, I'm pretty sure you've gone through so many transformations over the years, right? Like from where you were to where you're at now in terms of AI, technology, all of those stuff. What are some of the good things you have seen, but also some of the bad things you've seen during the transformation stages?
Sure. Well, yeah, the good things is that there's so many tools available to us, and they just continue to get better and easier to
Yeah.
use, right? The new AI ML tools that are available to us. I mean, we could spend weeks regressing data in Excel. It's better to use the information to make decisions than your job is not creating the information, it is using the information. And I think that's kind of the more of the transition that I think we're going to continue to see. The flip side is, and what I see in a lot of companies, they invest heavily in ERP systems and tools, even some new AI assisted tools, but the challenges are using them, right? And making sure they're optimized and they're used and they're embraced, and we're really taking full advantage of the systems that we have. And it comes back down to some of the basics that I think sometimes companies stumble on, and that is just the basics of ensuring that you have good processes, ensuring that you have mechanisms to govern those processes and people have ownership over those processes, good metrics that show the governance, right? Are you performing the way you're supposed to perform? The underlying thing, not just focused on the OKRs, like are we achieving the things that we want to achieve, but are we actually transacting the way we're supposed to transact, and making sure there's good ownership. Those nuts and bolts of making sure that there's ownership and governance over the processes themselves, and we're fully exploiting the systems that we've invested in. Those are some of the challenges I think a lot of companies face.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure you have so many stories now that you're in consulting as well. Can you share like a story of a time where you were able to actually reshape the operational, cost and efficiencies by outsourcing some of the services that, were an internal, I would say, baggage, right?
Outsourcing a challenge, utilizing outsourced capabilities, right? It starts with evaluating what are the things that you're really not adding a lot of value, right, by expending a lot of internal resources maintaining, and you could easily export that to some other body that can do that very efficiently, effectively, in a cost effective manner, right? I saw a lot of that at Southern California Edison. We did a very large outsourcing of coding, right, at the time. And coding's a lot easier today because you got a lot of good tools, but still it's a necessary responsibility, especially when you're embedding a new ERP system. In that case, it was a very large expenditure of resources directed at coding, specifically around SAP and in bringing it in this environment. I think other companies can benefit from that as well, especially around like catalog, master data maintenance. I mean, things that absolutely are the foundation of any effective supply chain. You have to have good foundational data in your system. It's got to be accurate. Otherwise, what happens is the work of the organization is fixing things in the transaction phase that we're not right in the master data phase, right? Lead times aren't right, prices aren't right, suppliers aren't right. If that becomes the work, and the work really should be looking forward and saying, okay, how do we engage with sales? How do we engage with marketing? How do we understand what's coming so we can be better prepared for it? How do we manage risk? Let's look at the whole thing. Those are the things we ought to be doing. So taking some of those repetitive things could be AP processes, right? Where we don't have great automation. We can easily outsource some of this stuff, those repetitive tasks. Ideally we want to automate, we want to make it very frictionless and just happens, right? But where there's people spending large amounts of resources putting data into certain places, I think there's a huge opportunity of outsourcing some of it. And of course, the continuous improvement, right? So now we want to continuous improve could be something as simply as optimizing the integration between an external system and another external system, right? So you've got two systems that don't talk to each other. So, hey, we need to optimize this. Let's evaluate the API interface. Let's tweak it. Let's outsource that, get it done very quickly and efficiently. And also the process of maintaining those API interactions or API connections. Can you automate that through some external resources? I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, I relate to like almost all of the stuff you said, because that's where we're at too at Vserve. It's the part where we have to help the companies actually understand that are they even ready for the the outsourcing services to even begin, right? Where are they at in the platform, and kind of guide them through. And consultants like you kind of help us with that process, where they actually step in and let the companies know, like, hey, these are some of the things you should look at, right? When you're doing all these things, like, what are some of the most kind of gaps, or I would say opportunities in supply chain design that you have most frequently helped clients in terms of kind of outsourcing or just even managing it internally? properly?
Yeah, so I think, again, the primary improvements that a lot of companies need to make, again, it goes back to the nuts and bolts of doing just the primary role of the supply chain is to optimize, right? So you want to reduce your inventories, but improve your service level, right?
Yeah.
And to do that, again, it starts with having the good master data, having good processes of managing that master data as it changes, right? That governance, right? New product adds, products being taken away, et cetera, right? Second thing is evaluating. Now you've got that data, getting tools in place that evaluate exactly how the company is operating, right?
Yeah.
Where do we have excess inventory? Where do we have light inventory? Where are we not responding properly to demand? Do we have a good demand profile? And are we taking that and looking at across all the inventory locations and all the demand locations? And are we optimizing, right? And those nuts and bolts of having that infrastructure in place. Then the next big challenge is that next level. And that is, how do we engage the entire corp, right?
Yeah.
To make decisions about how we're going to manage going forward. Instead of the supply chain group is going to say, okay, we're going to have X amount of weeks of it, and we're going to set a service level of this, right? What about sales? The sales have a different perspective on that. And of course, they always want lots of inventory and 100% availability, right? But and so this tension, bring them together, have an effective S&OP process that brings that supply and operations, that sales and operations together to make those decisions together, right? So there's not an unlimited set of resources, and service level and inventory versus the cost of that capital on the shelf versus on the balance sheet. Right?
Yeah.
That's a fundamental decision that companies need to make as in concert between sales and operations. It shouldn't be just one pipe. And I've seen it work both ways. I've seen it where sales really drives the whole process. And you wind up with perhaps bloated inventories or inventories not in the right place or inventories not ready for what they're going to need to execute, right? And I've seen it the other way where, hey, we're really lean and we start starving customers. We have that tension there. Bring those two together, make decisions. And then finally, looking at how you're operating, evaluate your inventory. Do that ABC XYZ analysis. Do we stock a lot of things and we're wasting a lot of resources and capital on things that are not giving us a payback?
Yeah.
If those things are not moving, they're expiring, they're being thrown out, or there's just excess inventory, is there any value to that sale? In some cases, there might be. We're going to put this stuff here and our customer who wants it there, they're going to pay for it, right?
Yeah.
It's there to protect them. Okay, great. But a lot of cases is, we put it in place because we thought maybe we'd get some value out of it and it started going, and it just didn't. And we don't look backwards at this stuff. And so that should also be integrated in your process of evaluating the breadth of your materials and your sales support and saying, are we doing the right thing? Are we making good decisions? And constantly evaluate periodic basis, every month, every quarter, jointly with sales. Those are the things I think are most transformational for a lot of companies when they really start refining the integration of supply chain with the organization.
Yeah, that's some very good points. I'm going to just give a pause. Perfect. I'm going to just jump into the next question then, and we'll go from there. Kind of moving on from, the way you manage all of these inventory and stocks and all these metrics. How do you actually convince the stakeholders, right? Like there's so many traditional stakeholders that are so scared to kind of jump into the new story bandwagons or even like doing, offshore things and stuff like that. How do you approach those stakeholders? What is your thought process or things that you kind of do to help with this thought process?
Yeah, absolutely. It's critical, right? So you have to create the burning platform, right? So the analogy of the burning platform and the oil rig and question, you jump off or you stay on. But you've got to create that burning platform and get everybody to buy in. And so it starts with evaluating how you perform and having the right data, right? So a lot of times we look at companies and they tend to have the same problems over and over, but they don't realize, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing is getting a good set of data that we can all ground on objectively. This is the status. This is how we perform, right? This is our on time and in full, performance, right? Mm-hmm. This is our current turns on inventory, and compare that to the rest, right? Yeah. If we're turning our inventory to, or if we have, $50,000 a month of expiring materials that we have to throw out, right? Bring that forward, create that burning platform, and demonstrate. If we do things different, here's the objective. We can improve performance. We can lower inventories, but we're going to have to make some changes in the way, because if we're going to continue to do the same things, we're going to have the same results. I think the other thing that I've encountered is the adage of, well, it's always worked for the last, so why change it? And I think the question there is, well, that's where benchmarking comes in. If we stay the same, and yes, it's benefit, and we've had these manual tools and processes in the past, and they've been effective. We're a profitable company and we're growing and we're hitting our EBITDA. That's fine. But if we continue doing the same things in the same way, everyone else is going to pass us up because everyone else is going to be better, faster, and cheaper. And we can always be better, right? One of the things that always amazed me, this is going way back to my Intel days, we go through a slowdown, right? And with belt tighten, let's tighten our belts. Let's go look at where we can save money. It's like, well, why weren't we doing this 6 months ago, a year? Because that goes straight to the bottom line. We could get that stock price up another 10% if we were doing this a year ago. So you should always be doing those things, always continuously improving. But it starts with developing that burning platform and really aligning with sales, operations, finance, marketing. What do we want to achieve? And what are the challenges that we've had that we want to fundamentally? Let's get that stuff out on the table and have a real dialogue about it. And once you do that, and you get an objective review of your operations that you all buy into. Right now, you can start setting a path together that gets you to a better place. But you've got to bring out some of the bad stuff, get it out on the table, right? Other things I think are really important too with respect to the burning platform is what could change, right? What possibly could change. So right now, a lot of discussion around tariffs. We don't know what's going to, right? Hopefully over time it will sort itself out. But what could be the impact of tariffs, and what is our plan to mitigate challenges with tariffs? Same thing with FX, right? A lot of changes in the currency rate, a lot of changes potentially in interest rates. So what could happen, right? Let's start looking forward. What could happen, and what would we do to mitigate those challenges should they happen, and be prepared, right? Well, I just saw HD just announced their earnings, and one of the comments they made in their earnings call was that no one country is more than 10% of their imports from outside the United States, right? And they're doing that in particular because they don't want to be reliant on one particular geography that could be exposed, right? And I thought that was very forward thinking. And so I think it's really important to look forward to what could change. And then also business up, business. What would happen if we bag that really big client that's 30% revenue boost, right? Will we do that, right? Be prepared for that. What would we do to prepare? What's our moat look like? Where are we exposed? So if we lose business, what? I think those are really valuable discussions to have. And it starts with really having that burning platform for what are the challenges that we have and why do any change? Because that's the first thing you've got to uncover is getting everyone on board in the same, pulling on the same rope.
Yeah. I always love the analogy of the burning platform because I know we have gone through many of them during our time when we were working, no matter in which field we were working in, sales, marketing, business development, everything. So I am excited to hear an actual example of you just going in and giving this reality check to one of the companies out there during your consulting days. Can you share a story with us?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a couple, and I'll go back to in particular, last couple of companies I've been involved with. Again, if you just go in and start changing things, right? Yeah. That are intrinsically better, it's not necessarily valued. It might be even looked at as like, why are we doing this? And this is a negative.
Who's this guy?
Yeah. Right, exactly. So, right. So I'd go back to Beyond Meat, right? So we really didn't have we had really no S&OP process, right? And we had really no fundamental understanding of our capacities that was out in front of it, right? And our demand process was not reviewed together, right? Yeah. So getting all that stuff out on the table. So create some good capacity models to show where our capacity is and get a process of this cyclical monthly process of going through a demand profile, right? And integrating that with this capacity. And a couple of things fall out of this immediately. Yeah. Our sales are 70% on the East Coast, 30% on the West Coast. Our manufacturing is 70% on the West Coast, 30% on the East Coast. And here we are using all this very expensive West to East is more expensive than East to West reefer, right? Refrigerated cold chain transportation from West to East. Second, we're loading our external manufacturers first, our internal capacity second. So any volume flex is in our internal factories. And so we're getting killed in absorption, right? Contracting challenge, of course, right? Affecting contracts are a little bit more flexible on the outside, right? So we can move that stuff internally and start really sweating those assets and reducing absorption, right? Those are the things that really fell out of this process. And we were able to start moving our manufacturing west to east, align the manufacturing with where the product is needed. right? And, real quickly, $40 million result in reduction of transportation costs. And then the increased improvements in absorption in our internal factories, we start really moving sweating those assets and reducing that absorption. So again, it comes with getting the data together. So getting a demand profile, getting your capacity models together, starting a monthly process, right? We create this model, right? And together we make a call of what we're going to do. So it's not just the supply chain folks going, hey, we're just going to move stuff around, right?
Yeah.
Why? What are you going to do? Why are you going to do it? And also in this process, we're evaluating the demand on a monthly basis and how we realize it or don't realize it. Right? So we're learning, right? And the objective isn't to be right necessarily. At the start, obviously you want to improve your demand and your demand projections, but the object is let's learn, right? So if every month we are 30%, we're realizing 30% of our plan, let's learn, right? Let's make the call and say, you know what, we're being a little optimistic, right? And why? And let's go, or vice versa. We're getting surprised by upside. Let's go figure out why, right? And those are the things that fall out of this process immediately and start down this path of improving your performance based on just getting that feedback. Right? When you're driving down the road and you see the sign that says your speed is, everyone's slow, right? Yeah. Same thing. You get that metric, right? You can't improve without that metric hitting you in the face and together, doing something.
Yeah, perfect. So data obviously is like the most important aspect of any business, right? But in supply chain, what are some of the top 3 metrics that you should always have kind of like your eyeballs on? Like these are the 3 most important things that you should always be checking.
Yeah. Well, it's gonna be tough to be just 3, but
you can do more.
Yeah, sure. But you first have to start with the inventories, right? Yeah. So how fast is the inventory turning and stock outs, right? Mm-hmm. So first things first, you got to be effective before you're efficient. So you got to make sure you're not stocking out, right? You're losing sales when you do that. So stock outs, right? But then the efficiency, how well you turn it, and the excesses. Right. So you get the good understanding of your inventory of what's dead or not moving, what's moving and good, and what's you're stocking out and getting that on. So I have good metrics on that stuff. Right. And to the extent that you can predict that in the future, some AI type tools. So 3 weeks out, 4 weeks out, are we going to have stock? Because then you can do something about it. If it's today, we have stock out, nothing I can do about it other than say why, right? Yeah. What am I going to do differently? But if you've got the ability, and so I'm working right now with a company called Streamline, great AI platform, right? Looks at the last 2 years of data, does trending. It integrates right with your ERP system, has the ability to say, hey, 2-3 weeks out in the future, you're going to have some challenges. You could have some challenges. Yeah. The second piece is really looking at service level, right? It's another metric I think you really need to look at. And what should the service level be? And are you measuring it? Do you have good performance metrics on how you perform to delivery, right? On time and in full. You've got to have those metrics. You've got to demonstrate that you're delivering the product as per required. So that's an important. Now, when you start getting into actually improving things, some of the things that you also have to do is look backwards at the source data and the thing that we miss a lot of times, right? So we rely on transaction data being clean. It's supposed to be here on Tuesday. It's Wednesday. It's Thursday. It's Friday. Still not here. That date still says Tuesday, right? Yeah. You've got to have good ERP hygiene, right? And if you don't have that, then your data is just not going to work. And you're just inserting variance. And what that means is you have to have higher inventories, right, to cover it up. So simple things like past due transaction, right? Transfer orders between warehouses, incoming purchase orders, sales orders not properly closed out. If you have a sales order that's 3 and 4 months old that's still sitting there, it still looks like demand that you're reacting to, but it's just not been closed out. Making sure you've got those queues defined, you've got owners on each one of those things, and they're held accountable for making sure they're clean, right? And then also a Pareto around those things so that you can understand, well, why does this happen, right? Or which suppliers are most, a challenge with delivery and things like that, or which warehouse is not performing. So that source data, making sure your systems and your processes are running effectively is vital as well, right? So the processes, getting good governance on that, good metrics there, the performance, inventory, fill rates, right? Excess, right? And finally, on time and in full, are you actually delivering, in high confidence, right? So those are some of the metrics I think are just vital in any type of supply chain, right?
Yeah, that's ERP. I remember when you talk about ERP, we've had several conversations on it. So I'm always like interested to learn. How do you evaluate? Do you have a separate way of evaluating ERP? How to optimize it? And, what are some of the signs that you've seen from, companies you've worked with that are holding them back? What are those telltale signs?
Yeah, it's just vast amount. It's Excel.
Excel.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? You can judge how well your ERP system works, and other ancillary tools, WMS and TMS, is how much Excel is in the environment. If you are running your company on Excel, right, your ERP system and related tools are not effective, right?
Yeah.
I think that should be a goal of, Excel is a great tool to use for a wonderful number of different reasons, right? But its analysis, it should be spot analysis, right?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be running when you find yourself running the business because on an Excel model, or Google Sheets or whatever. I think you need to reevaluate. Can we do this in our ERP system, right? If we can't, then how do we make it do it? Can we implement something else? Can we integrate something else, right? The second is, how many steps does it take to get, right? So an example at one company with an external manufacturing where we had consigned inventory, right? Inventory is never accurate. There's a lot of adjustments going on. And, I flow charted out the entire process, and it's like 45 steps, right? There's no way 45 steps. If you have a 0.5% defect in 45 steps, you have 20%, right? Yeah. So, how many steps does it take you to get things done? And it usually goes back to, either the ERP system doesn't do the things that you want it to do, or your process hasn't been really well integrated into your ERP system. And usually it's a combination of the two. I mean, ERP systems are just tools. If you don't use them and use them effectively and make them work for you, then they're not going to work, right? You're going to be back in Excel. And Excel is easy because everybody in the environment, they can do Excel. It was really hard for a lot of folks to really get in deep in your ERP system and say, how would I restructure this? Because that also requires change in everybody else. Change this transaction from this to this. Well, that requires 4 or 5 different people in the organization, finance, accounting, and accounts payable, so on and so forth, maybe to modify the way that they do, right? Because they're going to see data differently. So it's easier sometimes just pull that out, just do Excel, and then that and email right there. I think that's the big telltale sign. If you got a lot of Excel running your business, time to reevaluate, are these tools that we're spending a lot of money on licensing, right? Are we just using it for invoices and purchase orders, or are we actually using it to run the business?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, because I worked with a few companies where they have an ERP environment. They have, everything they need, but they don't know how to really use it. It's not really optimized for their business standards, right? So how do you get a company there is really important, because even if you have something, that doesn't mean it's working for you. You need to make it work for you. So I completely understand. It just baffles me that there's still some traditional companies that are all Excel. And it's, how do you change that perspective? Like, how do you go in and just tell them, stop, do this?
Well, again, it's the burning platform, right? So an example of one recent company. So all the materials planning was done in Excel, okay? And so let's dive in and let's get this Excel looking like what we would want our system to look like, right? And it's very difficult to do it across 2,000 SKUs, right? Yeah. But maybe you take 100 SKUs and you start evaluating seasonality, you start evaluating the coefficient of variation on an individual SKU in one of the 8 warehouses, right? You're demonstrating the value of how to use that data in a different way to set a stock level that delivers a particular result, instead of, we're going to have 5 weeks of inventory across the supply chain. 5 weeks of inventory might work great for some items, right? Maybe this item that is, it's every week, you're plus or minus 15% in volume, right? You have a very predictable supply. You have very little seasonality, right? If you do, it's a gradual shift. So looking at the last 5 weeks, right? Or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and setting that as your average, and setting 5 weeks of average demand on that is acceptable. In other cases, extreme seasonality, high variance, maybe 0, 0, 0, 100, 0, 100, right? On demand on a weekly basis or period basis. And you're always challenged with that 5 weeks. And so demonstrating in a number of items how to really do this, but then it rapidly comes into, okay, our systems and tools need to go do this. This is a big challenge, right? Are there tools available to us that could set these values, look at the entire data set and regress it, and really set inventory based on the coefficient variation of not just 2,000 SKUs, but the 2,000 SKUs in 8 different warehouses that we have, right? So now you're looking at 16,000 individual data points, right? And setting inventory levels for all of those instead of just 5 weeks of inventory, right?
Yeah.
So then you bring in these other alternative tools and say, hey, this is what would allow us to go do that. We can't do it. On top of that, can we automate some of the things we're currently doing today? We got 5 or 6 people that are just that's all they do, and they've been doing it for the last 10 years is creating reports, right? Can we automate it, right?
Yeah.
And that's a little daunting for a lot of companies because their identity is I run this report and then I run this report and I run this report. And that's my entire week running these reports. It's like, our job should be evaluating the information, decision, right? So you have to also ensure that the organization has a way forward for all these folks. They're going to be displaced with what they're doing and show them that the value is better opportunities for them, better jobs, better things to go do, right? More strategic things to do than just turn this crank on this report, right? It starts with, I think, going and looking at the inefficiencies of the system processes and how much time we're spending in Excel and showing that if we can migrate from this to that, right, we reduce these resources and it enables us to do things we just can't do manually planning, right? Because, taking a much more sophisticated approach. And today there's so many great tools that are out there that enable us to go do that. That, I think it's time to go look at these. It's always time to go look at these, but right now, wow, just the ability to implement some of these tools cheaply and effectively and efficiently and quickly. That's fantastic.
That's such amazing. This conversation has been so insightful and precise, exactly what you need to do. And I always end my, podcast by asking that one question. One final question is looking back, to the leadership that you have had over the years and you being in leadership position. What is that one thing you wish you had learned earlier in your career that you want future leaders now to hear and be follow this, make sure you know this?
Yeah, I think I actually learned this fairly early in my career, but it could have been earlier. And it's something that I want to make sure that impart in all the people in the organizations that work for me, work with me, where I support, I serve. I think is a better way of stating it, is make sure we're focused on what we do as a company. Sometimes we're so focused on our task that we fail to remember or understand what we're doing is creating value and delivering it to a customer. And if we're not doing that, we're not moving the ball forward, right? And it gets back to my discussion earlier about we're creating that report, we're placing the purchase order, we're expediting stuff, we're responding to this, we're responding to that. All that stuff is not value added. The value add is creating that value of that product here, getting it there so it's sold and we can invoice. That's the value, right? And all this stuff, we want to figure out how to do it as efficiently as possible. We want to eliminate our job, right? So an early on experience I had, I was pulled into a conference room at Intel and appeared to my boss and he said, what's your job? I said, my job's this. I'm going to buy this, source this, negotiate this, maintain this. He goes, no, your job's get rid of your job. I said, what do you mean? He goes, if you don't get rid of your job, you're going to be doing the same thing for the next 10 years. You want to do that? He said, your job is, and he put it a little bit more succinctly. He said, look, the value add proposition, figure out how to do all this stuff efficiently as possible so you can go out and make better decisions, right? That forward the company objective, and that is providing that value, whatever it is, that product to the customer as efficiently as possible. Higher quality, faster, better, cheaper. That's the value add is that. And so that's something I learned fairly early on, and seeing that light go off with younger resources, finally get that take that ownership as opposed to, tell me what to do, right? But understand, hey, I'm the company, right? And I get it. I get what we're doing, and I'm pulling on that rope, and I'm going to provide that ultimate value to the customer. That's ultimately, I think, what we all need to remember is what are we doing? What are we really doing?
Yeah, not stick to your roles, but do something more. So that's such good advice, and your expertise pretty much on everything, from inventory to logistics to kind of getting that consulting work done. Everything has been so profound, Jim. I've learned so much, the clear roadmap that you provide, right? So it's been great talking to you today. I wish we can talk more. More series to come then. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge with us. And it was great having you here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.